Close it out with a little baseball talk. We already know who got the call to the hall, so to break it down a little more, does a great job covering baseball for USA Today. Steve Gardner joins us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. How you been, Steve?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always good to catch up with you. All right, so we've got our participants, Chipper Jones, Guerrero, Jim Thome, Trevor Hoffman. Martinez just missed it. Look, there's really no debate with these guys that got in. I was a little surprised that Jim Thome actually received only, I should say, almost 90% of the votes. Hoffman, we were looking at his numbers along with a guy like Billy Wagner and then John Franco. You know, is Hoffman, in your eyes, was he a surefire Hall of Famer?
I think from the voting, he was a cinch to get in, but in my mind, I would not have voted for him. I just think closers are such a small part of the game. I mean, such a specialist that, yes, he was very good, but in terms of how much, those guys should get credit for a save, I think saves are a made-up statistic, and it's not something that just because you get a lot of saves, you look at the, Mariano and Hoffman are up there at the top, but Lee Smith is next in line. John Franco is in that group of the top saves artists in history. It's a mixed match, and so no, I don't think Trevor Hoffman. I'm glad that he's in, and kudos to him. I just would not have put him on my ballot.
Yeah, I was a little. I kind of went the same route you did. The other day we pulled up Franco's numbers, and I know it is. I don't want to say it's a skewed stat come postseason because that's where your career is defined, really, if you're a closer in the postseason. And you look at Hoffman's ERA was 3.46. And then John Franco, and again, I know you can look at how many games. I'm just using this as an example, 1.88. And Franco's numbers are comparable. I mean, John Franco, how many, 424 saves he had in his career?
Yeah, and no sniff at all. And, Billy Wagner, you put his numbers up side by side against Trevor Hoffman's, and other than the save totals, Billy Wagner was a better pitcher than Trevor Hoffman was, everything taken into consideration. But, you get the ball at the end of the game, you close out a win, and you get the glory. And in this case, I think the voters recognize that Hoffman got a lot of that and deserved it, so he's going to be enshrined in Cooperstown.
I thought because Edgar Martinez, his numbers crept up from last year to this year, I figured, okay, if not this year, he's definitely a lock next year. Is there a bias against the DH?
I think a little bit, but there's an awful lot of social media push for Edgar, and people will reveal some stats. I try and look at everything. I did not think that Edgar was a Hall of Famer.
Okay.
But I'm willing to look at the stats that a lot of people put who certainly do feel that way and feel that way very strongly. I think a designated hitter, again, it's a specialist. He didn't get an opportunity to add to his value playing the field. And for me, it was just a fact that, his rate stats are great. And everybody quotes a lot of the, on base and the slugging percentages and everything like that. But just the raw numbers for me, he only had, 309 home runs in his career and 2,200 hits. So for me, you need a little bit more longevity to get in. But, he's got one more year on the ballot. I think there's going to be a lot more support come out for him next year. And I think he probably does get in 2019. How
about the doubles and the batting average throughout the course of his career, though? I mean, again, 343, 356, 327, 330, career 312 hitter.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, Rich, I feel like Larry Walker deserved to get in. And, you put up his batting average for his career exactly the same as Edgar Martinez. Emart had a little bit better on-base percentage. Walker was better in slugging percentage. And you throw in all the gold gloves that Larry Walker won defensively and an MVP award. I think there's a good case for Larry Walker to get in, and he only got 34% of the vote.
But would they also say, well, he also played the bulk of his career in Colorado? I mean, first early on in his career, Montreal, but then in that stadium, the ball carried a lot.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, he still played great defense,
no doubt,
and it doesn't take away from that. So I mean, he was a very well-rounded player. He stole bases. over 200 stolen bases in his career, and Edgar didn't really run much. So I think, scored more runs than Edgar Martinez, I believe. So you can compare two players and come to all sorts of different conclusions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I just feel like, for me, Walker was a great one.
I made the case, and I don't know if I asked you regarding this player. I made the case for Fred McGriff as a Hall of Famer, because if you look at his WAR, it's 52.4, which is 12 wins shy of the average Hall of Fame first baseman. He had peak years. He had consistency. Now, I know he didn't hit 500 home runs. I know he doesn't have 3,000 hits. He didn't win an MVP, but he was always in, top 10. He was a mainstay, an all-star, consistency, the average, one of the catalysts as well for those Braves teams. I also think what hurts him the most, and you tell me if you agree, is that he played in an era that was just overshadowed by a lot of the steroid sluggers.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And who knows what would have happened had he gotten those last 7 home runs that he needed to get to 500? Would we be looking at him any differently? I don't know. Now Sosa's had over 600 and he's not getting in. Jim Thome had over 600 and he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. I wonder too. Fred McGriff was on some very good teams and had some good postseasons. I do think he gets overlooked. And I think another thing too, Rich, is that we've got such a crowded ballot, and 4 guys getting in this year might help it a little bit. But when you had such, players with Bonds and Clemens and them getting a lot of votes,
take away from the
people
votes.
Who are going to vote for them are going to put him in before they put in Fred McGriff. And I think Fred McGriff kind of gets the short end of the stick. A great career for sure. I love to watch him hit too. He was a favorite player of mine to watch. So I do think that he doesn't get as close a look as maybe he should get.
How about Omar Vizquel? Because listen, Ozzie Smith got in the Hall of Fame because of his defense. Omar Vizquel gets 37% of the votes. I mean, just glossing over, is he a Hall of Famer to you?
Yeah, we had this debate. There are some strong points of view on both sides of this, and I come down on the side of Vizquel was a great fielder, but you've got to do a little bit more with the bat than what he did. He got singles, got a lot of hits during his career, but almost 2,900 of them.
Yep.
But still, over 20-some seasons. And he just wasn't the best player on his team offensively. He's still a great defensive player, but he wasn't really the key to that team in Cleveland when he was with them or with Seattle. I just think Vizquel is a very good player, but he does not raise his defense doesn't pull up his lack of offense to make him a Hall of Famer.
And what hurt him too, again, talk about the era in which he played. You're talking about the early 90s all the way, really the bulk of his career, 2005. Look at some of the shortstops in the AL that he had to deal with because he only made the All-Star team, I think, 3 or 4 times. Conversely, you look at a guy in Ozzie Smith, again, no power,
right.
2,400 hits, but yet every single solitary year, Golden Glove, All-Star. And then he had a couple of big moments in the postseason. 2 more before I let you get out of here. When you look at some of the, the ones that have been linked to the steroids and the PED and the Mitchell report, guys like Bonds, Clemens, I know the percentages has gone up. Do you think, and forgive me if I've asked you this in the past, do you think it's only going to take one of these players to get in where all of a sudden the floodgates and the doors open up for all these other players?
I think these guys are the test case, but I think right now we have players in the Hall of Fame that have used some sort of performance-enhancing drugs, even beyond amphetamines that were very common and were very legal in clubhouses, in the 60s and 70s. I think that we've already passed that. What it is are we going to, embrace the guys that we have super strong suspicions that their performance was elevated to a magnitude of 2 or 3 times of what they may have accomplished had they not been? I think with Bonds and Clemens, those guys were already Hall of Famers, and I think the extra that they got doesn't put them from the Hall of Very Good into the Hall of Fame. I think they deserve to be in because we don't know exactly who did and who didn't. and that affects the players that they're playing against. And again, that's where Fred McGriff, I think, again, gets the short shift, because he was somebody who I think most people acknowledge was clean, although we don't know for sure. I just think that when you tell the story of the late 90s and the 2000s, you have to have Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens as part of it. And in that respect, I think that they need to be there, and you can put something on their plaques if they get in about, the downside of things. But I think they deserve to be Hall of Famers, because you can't tell the story of baseball without them in there.
Okay, it's a fair point. Where I'm loosening up my stance a little more. I would say, was Bonds a Hall of Famer the first decade of his career before he juiced? Absolutely. He was the best player in the game. The same thing with Alex Rodriguez, and I'm a huge A-Rod fan. I'm still stubborn, but I'm going to loosen up my stance. Let me let you get out of here on this one. I'm curious. Got a couple minutes, about 2-3 minutes to go here. Albert Bell. We always talk about some of the players that just never got along with the media. Besides that, his numbers are just godly. Like, he was one of the best sluggers in the 90s. How come Albert Bell just never gets any Hall of Fame love?
It's one of those cases where I think you hit it, because the baseball writers are doing the voting, and because he did not have a stellar reputation by any means. And I don't know of too many writers who actually liked him, and some actively didn't. I think that does cloud your judgment a little bit, and it makes you say, okay, well, I'll vote for somebody else before I'll vote for Albert Bell. And, drop him off the ballot and don't have to worry about him anymore. I'll tell you, Rich, I think he's a guy. Dick Allen is another guy that was very surly with the media, that didn't get a sniff. When you look at, his numbers in retrospect, wow, those are pretty outstanding numbers too. And you got another case where Jim Thome was a guy who was beloved by the media because he was friendly to everybody, treated everybody equally, from the clubhouse guy to the national TV correspondent. So I think that is another thing. He didn't need that little boost, because he got in with 90% of the vote because he was a great player. But I think that does play a role in it. And we've seen many times in previous years, especially in the awards voting, Albert Bell should have been an MVP one year, but he wasn't. And I think that's part of the reason that he didn't get that MVP nod. So, I think it does play a little bit in a part of it, but you have to, as a writer and a reporter, you have to try and put that aside when it comes down to making the final call. Yes, you do. All right, my friend, I appreciate it. Great insight as always. Enjoy the weekend. We will talk next week. Always appreciate it, friend. Thanks so much, Rich. Always fun talking to you. Always. You got it. Have a great weekend. Steve Gardner joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.